Okay, I see the red dot, so we're recording. Welcome to our webinar this evening. My name is Brenda Rowe, and I will be serving as your moderator this evening. I serve on the National Sheep Improvement Program Board of Directors as the Suffolk representative. And we're delighted to be able to bring you this session tonight. And I would like to thank our sponsor. Our sponsor for the webinar this evening is Premier. Many of you in the sheep business may be very familiar with Premier and have purchased equipment or supplies from them. Premier's really a unique company serving the sheep industry. They started in 1977 by Stan Potratz. And Stan had lived in England for a couple of years, and when he moved back to Iowa, he felt as though he really couldn't get his hands on the kinds of equipment and supplies for his sheep operation like he was able to do when he was in England. So that is how Premier was birthed, and that was back in 1977. Stan is now semi-retired, but still has some activity with the company and is a very, very good supporter of the American sheep industry. And Ben Rothy is the CEO with Premier now. And one of the things that's really unique about Premier is they don't just sell equipment, they use the equipment that they sell. They have a working farm with the business, and so they're constantly utilizing the equipment they sell, as well as developing things that they end up selling as well that are useful to folks in sheep operations. So we'd like to thank Premier for their support of the program this evening. National Sheep Improvement Program has a tremendous amount of things to offer to sheep producers. My husband and I have raised Suffolk sheep for 39 years and have been enrolled in NSIP for 20 of those 39 years. And NSIP has just done so many great things for our flock. It has allowed us to build a better breeding program, to add more value to our sheep, and in turn end up being more profitable. And I think particularly with the environment that we're faced today, profitability is extremely important in our operations. And NSIP is a vehicle to allow you to be more profitable. So I'm a firm believer in the program, and I think you'll enjoy what we'll be presenting this evening if you're brand new to just learning about NSIP. Kind of an outline for tonight, how the program will flow is we've had a little bit of a change in plans with one of our presenters not being able to get in just right now. So instead of starting with Dan Morrical, we will be starting with Becky Durlick. And Becky works with Willoughby Sales. And Willoughby Sales is the company that is managing the NSIP online sale. And that's kind of what's driving our webinar this evening. We found that a lot of folks are maybe interested in understanding how to use estimated breeding values. And so that was driving our webinar this evening, as well as maybe interested in purchasing sheep in the NSIP online sales that start tomorrow. And this is the first time that NSIP has ever offered an online sale. All of the other years, for about the last 15 years, we have had a live sale held in Spencer, Iowa. And with the current virus situation, it wasn't feasible to do that this year. So that's how we ended up with an online sale. And some folks are not particularly comfortable with navigating an online sale. And so that's why we have Becky here with us this evening. Becky does a marvelous job of working with customers, whether a buyer or somebody like me who's a consigner. I was a consigner for online for the first time this year. And Becky just has this wonderful ability to walk people through the process and to help you feel comfortable. So we're going to start with Becky as our first presentation this evening. And then when Becky's done, we'll go to Dan Morrical's presentation, where he'll be talking about how to utilize EBVs in your operation. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to Becky. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate that introduction. That's very kind of you.
You know what? One thing I just forgot. I hate to interrupt before you start.
Okay.
If you, throughout the evening, if you have questions, some of you have discovered the chat box, and if you look on the very bottom of your screen, if you're a participant, and you wiggle your cursor, you'll see a toolbar that will come up on the bottom, and you will see chat in a little bubble. And you just click on that and type your question in. That will come into the chat box. I will be able to see your question, and then I will feed the questions to our presenters this evening. So go ahead, Becky.
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, thanks for the introduction. That's very kind. And I do understand that this is a first year for the online sales. So I do understand as well that there's a little bit of a learning curve with getting registered and navigating our website. It's just going to be just a little bit. So I'm going to do my very, very best to walk from step A to step Z when the sale's completely over. So again, with the chat box, if you have questions, let Brenda know, and we can even circle back around and answer some of those questions. I'm happy to do so. I am going to share my screen. I need to have the ability to do that here.
I'm working at it. I thought I had already done that.
Perfect. That's okay. Thank you. Okay, so we've got my screen up here. Let me get rid of a couple of these things here. So what you'll first do is on the Willoughby site, let me get rid of this down here. There's a little blue guy up here in the corner. I'm going to go ahead and log out so you can see what it looks like. Either up in the corner or the login register. If you are not a current bidder on the W Livestock platform, you'll need to start with the register here. And a screen will come up that looks like this. And I'm going to use a demo site to fill it out. So what we'll have to do takes just a few seconds to fill all this information out. So once you fill it out, you have the option to click your farm name, driver's license, actually this won't be on the Willoughby site, and then you'll click register. This is gonna come up, I'm already a registered user on there, so I'll get an error code. And once you do that, and you log in, it will be your email account and then whatever password you created. There are no bidder numbers for this. It's just your email address and your bidder number once you get registered. And then you're gonna wanna go to under my account. I've had some calls and inquiries about, we do have to have a credit card on file. We will not run that credit card unless you ask us to. We will, it is just for security purposes on our end. You'll need to verify your phone and add a credit card payment. So for verifying your phone, when you're under my account, you'll see this page, your profile, validate phone. You'll click that. And then I get a text message that gives me a number here. and I just enter that 4541. And that will validate my phone. The next thing, a couple of these you don't have to do. Interest, if you're interested in more sheep sales, you can get emails for that. Notifications is kind of an important one. If you are not going to be around your computer and want to place a bid, if you choose to get notified text message, it will send you the link of the animal that you're bidding on. So you can just click that link and you're able to bid from your phone. And billing and payments, this is where you are going to add your credit card information. So right now it's going to say, I currently have no payment on file. And then you need to click that and enter all your card information. And then just click save at the end of it. Does need to be a valid credit card or it won't save. And again, you do not have to pay for your purchase with this credit card. I want to stress that it's a security measure on our end. And once you do that, you're good to go. I'm going to place a bid on a sale that I created on a demo site, just so you can see the process here. And I also will show you on the Willoughby site. I'm going to flip back here for a second just to talk about this. On each of the NSIP sales, I have added kind of a dummy lot. It's just a practice lot. There will be no charges. I strongly recommend once the sale opens tomorrow, just log in and practice a couple times so you are comfortable bidding on the sheet. To place a bid, it's going to ask you a couple of questions. It will say, make you answer, yes, I am 18 years of age or older. Question number 1, on our site, it will ask you how you want to pay, and it's going to give you the option of a credit card, the one that you have on file, just so you know there is a 3% convenience charge if you choose that. You can pay by ACH electronic check. There is no additional fee for that, or you can send a check within the 7 days. So you'll have those choices. You will also have another question, how would you like for us to contact you the day after the sale? So we can either make a phone call, we call and say thanks for the purchase and make sure that you chose the correct payment method, and to make sure that you got your invoice. And then you'll just need to click I agree. And at that point, you can place your bid. One thing to note, if you're the winning bidder, this green will come up and say you are winning. Once you're outbid, it turns red and it says you have been outbid. So I'm going to go back to the NSIP sale here. One way, I know there's lots of consignments in here. One way to kind of keep track of just the ones that you want to bid on is on each lot, there's the little eyeball down here. When you click these, that adds it to a watch list. So I'm going to add a few of these. And your watch list is over here on the left-hand side. You click that. It will say new watch list, and then you'll be able to bid from this point once the sale is open. You'll be able to click here to place your bid. So you can have lots from each of the NSIP sales in your watch list and just bid completely from there. You don't have to necessarily go into the sale itself. I think that's all with that. The first sale, the Polypay sale, opens up tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that's when you can start bidding. It does go into extension time. It's a racehorse style. We call that a soft ending. So at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, if a bid is placed at 7:54, the clock will turn to 5 minutes. And every time any lot is bid on, it will reset that clock to 5 minutes until the sale, there is no bidding on any lot for a full 5 minutes. So do not be surprised if it lasts 30 minutes or an hour. As long as there is active bidding on any lot, it will reset that extension clock to 5 minutes. So I don't want anybody to be surprised about that. Once the sale goes into extended bidding and there's no bidding for 5 minutes, the clock will wind down. You'll see that it says pending and the bid buttons are taken away. Nobody can bid at that point. And then it will say verifying, and then it will say ended at that point. Once the sale ends, the lots that you are bidding on, it will say you have won. And then shortly after that, it will, you'll get an email with your invoice in it. And from that invoice, you can pay by electronic check, you can pay by your credit card, and it will also have the mailing information if you choose to send a paper check to us as well. So a couple other things to note, I will show you over here on this one. You can place a max bid on your the lot that you're interested in. That way, if you have to step away from the computer for a while and you know what you're willing to pay, you can place that bid. The computer will only place the bid to the next bid increment. It does not jump your bid. So if that's something that you would choose to do, that is available for you. And if you choose the text notification, you will not get a notification until it has reached your max bid on that one. So,
Becky, I have a question in regards to the max bid. If
Yes.
someone does put in the max bid,
Mhm.
and it gets to that point, but then they are sitting watching and they decide, oh, well, maybe I want to spend another $50 or $100. Can
Yeah.
they then go in at that time and start regular bidding, even if they have previously submitted a max bid?
Absolutely. Or if they decide at that point they want to increase their max bid, they can do that as well.
Okay.
But yeah, once
Great.
they get outbid from that max bid, if they choose to continue bidding after that, absolutely, you can continue.
Thank you.
Yes. Yep. Once the invoices are sent right after the sale, you have 7 days to pay for your purchase. One thing to note that I've had a couple of calls and questions about transportation. That is between the buyer and the seller. Some of them have put on their lots some recommendations. Also on our website under auction info, there is a trucking tab where we have lots of different people that provide transportation for some of our consigners all across the country. So there's options there if you want to reach out to one of them ahead of time to kind of have them, check into where they're going to be transporting to.
Becky, we have another question from one of our participants. Says, so with this racehorse system, say for instance, you want lot number 3 at $750, but someone bids $800 at $755.
Yep.
You don't want to pay more for that. Can you bid on lot number 6, which was 500, and you're willing to bid 600 on that? Yes. The question is, so if you get closed out of what you want and bidding is still open, can they bid on another lot?
Absolutely. And honestly, that is the purpose of the racehorse style, because people do have a max budget. And this leaves you opportunity to jump on your second choice, third choice, to be able to stay active in the sale.
Great.
Yep.
Do we have any other questions?
Also, if you're having trouble that evening, there is always somebody on call with Willoughby Sales. I will be watching these sales each night. So definitely reach out if you have any questions or concerns or having any trouble. Always feel free to call the office or myself.
Great. Well, I think Becky does a really nice job of leading folks through the process. And so if we don't have any other questions at this point, we will move on to Dr. Morrical's presentation. But someone may end up having a question, Becky. So if you could
I'm gonna
hang
be
with
here.
us until the very end, there may be another question that will pop into someone's mind. I do see another question that has come in here, and
Okay.
that is, what is the bidding increase increment?
It goes by price. So it starts out at, I believe, $50, and then when it reaches, I think it's $1,000, it increases to I think $100. It will say on there what the bid increment is, but as the price increase, the increment does increase as well. But that gets into the 1,000. So I believe it's $50 up to $1,000.
Okay, but it will clearly say that.
Clearly state what the next bid is. Yes.
Right. So people will be able to tell.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. So we will move to the next part of the program. We have Dr. Dan Morrical with us this evening. And Dr. Morrical was the sheep extension specialist and faculty member at Iowa State University for 33 years. He's been a wonderful servant to the sheep industry. And Dan retired. And then in 2018, he came on to provide some assistance with Premier. And you've already heard the story about Premier. And so Dan works in production advisor capacity. He's certainly one of the small ruminant experts across the country. And the nice thing that I'm really delighted that we do have Dan with us this evening is Dan was the start of the National Sheep Improvement Program here in the United States back in 1987. And without Dan, we probably wouldn't have NSIP here in this country. So Dan just does, I think, a marvelous job of leading producers through how to use EBVs, what will work for your particular operation. And that's one of the really nice things about NSIP is it is not a one-size-fits-all kind of a program. It is a type of program that can be designed to fit you and your operation. Whatever your priorities are, you can make the decisions and you can decide which EBVs make sense for you to utilize in your operation. So we will go ahead and turn the program over to Dan.
Maybe we will, maybe we won't. It is good to be here. I am on my daughter's computer, so this could be ugly. I'm not.
Dr. Morrical, can you try to share your screen? I'm having trouble giving you host status right now.
Okay, how about
maybe that'll prompt it.
I did try to do that, and it says I don't have.
You need to make sure you've taken that privilege away from Becky and then give it to Dan.
Which I've been trying to do, and Becky and I have been writing since she talked, and I can't.
Okay.
Let me try something else here.
I tell a joke, but I don't have it.
Sharing with someone else than is sharing.
Okay, I just tried to share my screen and I was able to share my screen. So eliminate my privilege, Cody, and then you should be able to give it to Dan.
Actually only able to click on Rusty's name for some reason. We have Jeopardy music while I work through this.
Okay, well, technology is wonderful when it works and it's frustrating when it doesn't. So I think we will be patient.
Becky, did you get, oh,
Can we
I don't
see
know
me
what,
now?
You're getting
Dr.
there.
Morrical started screen sharing. There he is.
I don't know what happened, but good job, Dan. I had nothing to do with that.
All me.
Okay. So Dan, if you can close that little window, that little Google window. There's a little Google window over your slides. If you can click on that X.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, but it's
down in the lower
Yeah.
right-hand corner and get rid of that.
I can't see that. You guys are, hold on.
You should be able to, where your
I'm
cursor
getting it.
is, there you go, right there. Perfect.
I had to move us over, and now I'm moving us back.
Okay, you got that. And now if you can go to presentation mode, we should be all set. So go up to slide. No, we don't want slide. View. I think we want view. No, why aren't we seeing? Okay, try full screen. For some reason, that's not presentation mode.
It's not, but we're going to go anyway.
Okay.
You want to try around some more?
Well, just as long as the screen is large enough that people can see it.
So we're going to go ahead and get started. It's a pleasure to be here finally. Sorry, folks, I've got a virus on my computer. It shut down the camera app yesterday, and it shut down Zoom today because I was on the practice session yesterday and was getting along fine. So my credentials, I was born in Indiana. I had a lot more hair back then. I got my BS degree. Becky, don't be laughing at me. I had my BS degree at Purdue University. I grew up on a small farm in Indiana. Hartford City is my hometown. I attended Purdue, was on the livestock judging team, and was active in block and bridle. My graduate school was at New Mexico State University, where I received my PhD in ruminant nutrition back in 1984. As Brenda mentioned, I was a sheep specialist at Iowa State for 33 years. I co-developed NSIP back in 1987 with Dr. Doyle Wilson. So I owe my career really to NSIP because I don't think without it I would have gotten tenure and would have gotten to stay on at Iowa State. So why we're going to talk about this, why we're so much interest in NSIP, it's in the popular press, we're pushing it really hard, is from the roadmap. One of the goals of the roadmap that was funded by the Land Board was to increase production efficiency. The way to do that is with better sheep genetically, and the solution to do that is with NSIP and EPDs or EBVs, whichever way you want to say them. And I've got the website there, and it reformatted the colors when it switched onto my daughter's computer. But the other thing is, if we want to get more production out of the sheep, we got to feed them better, we got to keep them healthier, and we got to have better facilities so that we can run more ewes and raise more lambs. So if we think about the background, NSIP is the best performance evaluation program for seed stock producers in the United States. Land Plan, which is out of Australia, processes our data. When we first started at Iowa State, we ran EPDs like every 6 months. And obviously that wasn't timely enough because in many cases people had sold a really good one and no longer had him in their flock, that they needed to go buy him back from somebody else, which Iowa State did as well. We sold a ram to Todd at University of Wisconsin, and we ended up buying that ram back because he was a trait leader. The system we use is similar to what the beef industry, dairy industry, and swine industries use for their genetic programs. So when we think about that, it uses a technology called BLUP, which stands for Best Linear Unbiased Predictors. The reason we can do this system, do all of this, is computers, high-speed processing. The important thing to realize that with NSIP, we utilize and calculate EBVs using all of the performance data that we have, whether that's the sire, the dam, sibs, half full, aunts, uncles, cousins, offspring, all go into calculating one value for an individual. So it gives us really accurate values. So when we think about EBVs, estimated breeding values, it's based off the animal's performance compared to the average in the flock. I think a lot of people get confused and go, well, how can you compare a sheep in my flock in Iowa versus another flock in Kentucky? We do that by grouping them in contemporary groups to make fair comparisons and account for fixed effects. And obviously a fixed effect, something that does not impact the lamb genetically on how fast it grows as a single versus a twin. We all know singles grow faster. Does that mean genetically he's better, or does it mean he got more milk because he didn't have to share with a sister or brother? Yearlings versus mature ewes on weaning weights of their lambs. Obviously, the yearling ewes do not milk as heavy, so those weaning weights on the lambs out of yearlings have to be adjusted up to a mature ewe equivalent, or else we're biasing the system. And that's really the power we get with the EPDs, is we make those adjustments. Another example would be fall-born versus spring-born lambs. So the weather's a lot different. So we use age they're born in or season as another fixed effect. So a simple calculation on an EBV. We got Ram A with an adjusted post-weaning weight of 148 pounds. So that would be like his weight at 120 days in this example. His contemporary group flock average was 130. So he's obviously better than the average. So we take 148 minus 130. That's an 18-pound difference. That 18 pounds is not all genetics. It's the heritability of post-weaning weight is 0.3. So we multiply 18 times 0.3, hit the heritability of that trait to get 5.4. So that animal's EBV would be 5.4 pounds or 5.4 kilograms, depending on which system we're using. Doesn't really matter. Now that's simple because we just used one piece of data on that ram. What the computer does is it takes how that ram did, how his sister did if he was a twin, how the other lambs out of that sire did, and uses all that performance information into one massive calculation all at once, and comes up with an EBV that is the most accurate estimate of genetic merit for that individual. So it allows us to compare different flocks. We do that by having linkages. An example of that, ISU and the University of Kentucky both have our hamps on, and we've traded rams to get our flocks linked so that we get better estimates of EBVs. Multiple sons of a ram used in different flocks, and you'll see lots of footnotes on the write-ups about different rams that have been used in multiple flocks or sires that have been used in multiple flocks, which gives us really high accuracies. And you know, we think about a location as another contemporary group. Let's say there's two brothers that raise Dorsets together, but their farms are different. They're located 50 miles apart. That's two locations. So we need to make those adjustments today. So here's how you can do the calculations, assuming we have one ram used in 3 flocks. And in flock A, sire A109, his offspring were 4 pounds heavier than the average at 120 days. Flock B, they were 8 pounds heavier. Flock C, they were 6 pounds lighter. So which flock has the best genetics? The answer is, yes, I know, I can't wait for answers because nobody's going to speak because you guys are all blocked. The best flock is flock C. Because the reference sire does poorly in that flock. And that's how we can make a cross-flock comparisons to make accurate estimates on these sheep. Factors that impact how we improve our sheep. There are three things: heritability. Wool traits are really highly heritable. Reproduction traits like lambs born, lambs weaned are lowly heritable and lowly repeatable. So it's mostly environmental and management on lambs born. Generation interval, how fast we turn the flock over. Now, if I could buy a 5-year-old ram from Brenda and use him in my flock the first time, that's like using a ram. So we can use older rams. So it's actually the average of our rams and the average of our ewes is our generation interval. We tend to make that low on the ram side, change out rams pretty quickly and keep the ewes around because of the huge depreciation. Unless we can sell them to somebody else, we can't really justify turning the ewe flock over real fast. And then selection differential. How good are my replacements compared to the flock average? And in the sheep world, we don't use a lot of AI yet. We should, because we could use more of the trait leaders that have a greater selection differential, which would allow us to produce better sheep more rapidly. So in every flock, our sheep flock looks just like this. We've got the average in the middle above 0. That's where most of the sheep are. And then as we move away from the average, we get fewer and fewer individuals. What it lets us do is try to find those people, those animals that are on the extremes, to move the flocks further down the line. The reason that we can make so much progress with NSIP is instead of having 3 little flocks down on the bottom, we can put all those into one huge flock because all of them have EBVs, and we get much larger selection differentials. Now, the problem is some flocks can be on the left side, so they're below average, and they really got to find a really great one to move them back to the middle and move them to the right. If you get lucky and your sheep are already on the right, then you can sell more sheep for more money in the NSIP sales. So there's lots of traits and lots of numbers. So how do I get started looking at those online catalogs and all that information? And some people are a lot more wordy with their write-ups. Sorry about the guy at Iowa State and his long write-up. He's a judging team kid in the past, so he likes to use all those flowery terms. But we need to do self-reflection. What is important in our current flock? What is the problem? Do I have too many orphans because my ewes don't milk enough? So I need to select for more milk in my maternal sires. Are my lambs too fat when they go to market? Are they finishing at 110 pounds instead of 130 pounds? Maybe I need to find a terminal sire with more growth and less fat. So we need to figure out what specifically we need to improve to make our sheep flock more competitive. So in my opinion, what pays the bills in most flocks is weight, number weaned. If you're in a grid marketing program, selling on the grid, value-based marketing, then carcass enters in and is an important trait. If you are direct marketing to clients, carcass becomes more important because you have to satisfy them on the carcass quality that you send them. So we're going to go through I would use post-weaning weight EBV, the bigger the better if I was trying to make more money. Priorities might change depending on location. In some cases, some of our breeds are so big, they may not work on the East Coast, smaller lamb market with 110 to 120 pound market lambs. I almost said fat lambs, but I didn't want to say that. They're market lambs. Or if we're selling into the niche market, to the ethnic market, and they want 70, 80s. Terminal sires traditionally are too big. Now, one of the things, I'm going to get in trouble with some people, but I'm going to quote this. ASI produced a budget on profitability of sheep flocks in the United States. Wool income was 15%, lamb income was 70%, and cull ewe sales were 15%. And that was pretty similar in Wyoming versus Kentucky. Kentucky was their example of Midwest farm flock, and it was a little higher, obviously, on lambs and a little lower on wool. But lamb is where we can make the most money raising sheep. On a carcass, we have two traits: eye muscle depth. It is highly correlated with ribeye area at 0.8. So if they've got a bigger, deeper eye, they usually have a bigger eye. The other traits: back fat, negative is more positive, or negative is better. It takes fat off of their offspring. Now, can we get them too thin? Yes. And you push the extreme in anything, you can get them messed up. We can make the ewes too hard doing, poor fleshing. We can make them too large size so they can't eat enough groceries to stay in good condition. Indexes. Carcass plus index is what the terminal sires usually use for establishing our sale order at the Spencer sale. That index is 65% growth, 5% fat, 30% muscle. Now, it's not simple math where you multiply post-weaning weight times 65%, fat times 5%, because those traits have different standard deviations, or the amount of variability. If you go back to that chart with the normal standard deviations, because fat is a very small measure, the standard deviation on fat is very small. So how we do this is all indexes are based off of 100. So we use weaning weight and post-weaning weight. So it's weaning weight times 2.33, post-weaning weight times 3.5, estimated eye muscle depth at 11.4. So that's a big number, right? But even though it's only 30%, that's because eye muscle is really small. It's got a much smaller standard deviation at 1.3. And you do those calculations. Now, I think Jerry Sorensen's listening tonight. And the problem with Jerry's index and the polyphase that everybody likes to talk about is he doesn't account for the standard deviations. So he's really maybe not selecting quite like he needs to be. So traits, excuse me, I went too far. My fingers are too heavy. We got growth, carcass, maternal, wool, and fitness. For growth traits, we have birth weight, 60-day weaning weight, 120-day weight, yearling weight. For the Western range operations, their weaning weight might be closer to 200 days, but it still works. For birth weight, we need to worry about that in terms of dystocia, is why we have that. That's a new addition since we went to lamb plan. Obviously, in the cattle industry, we worry about birth weight a lot, but that's because they have singles and they don't like pulling calves. In the sheep industry, we generally have twins and triplets, hopefully. So dystocia is not that big a deal, except if I was breeding ewe lambs. I would try not to use a 5 or 6 if possible, birth weight ram because of dystocia. Now, they're not that big, but that's an example of how we can get into trouble. Weaning weight, excuse me. We get two values from weaning weights. We get direct growth, which we used in the carcass index, and that would be just a WW for weaning weight. And then we do a maternal weaning weight, which is abbreviated MWW, and that is an estimate of milk production. So it is an estimate of the extra weight or the lack of weight because of less or more milk produced by the dam. And I think this is one of the things that really can help us in terms of production efficiency is we can select sheep that not only can have more babies, but they produce enough milk to raise those babies. Now, Premier sells milk replacement. So I really shouldn't be promoting better use it with more milk, but if we have more lambs and produce more lambs without more work, letting the ewes do it, the whole industry is way better off. Post-weaning weight takes a 60-day adjusted weaning weight when we adjust for those fixed effects, sex, type of birth, type of rearing, now we don't weigh the lambs at 60 days. We get a weight between 38 and 75 or 78, and we adjust them back to 60. And then we add in the average daily gain post-weaning times 60 to get that post-weaning weight. Those two traits are really highly correlated, weaning weight and post-weaning weight. So carcass traits, eye muscle depth and back fat, we talked about. Fat is one of those traits that a negative value is good. We're taking fat off the animal. So there are three traits where it's negative is a positive, or it's better. Shouldn't say that it's a positive. Negative back fat, negative on fiber diameter, and negative on fecal egg counts. In parasite resistance, we have fecal egg count at weaning and fecal egg count post-weaning, and a negative number is better. Now, the key is, if we're going to do those tests, we got to have infected sheep, because we got to pull feces, submit it for analysis, turn that data in to get an idea of whether the animals are shedding lots of eggs or a few eggs. Now, I don't think we're ever going to get to a zero parasite sheep, but we're going to improve the fitness of those sheep. And there was a webinar maybe last week or 2 weeks ago that the Suffolk Association did on parasites and EBVs, and there's some indication that if they're good on fecal egg counts, negative number, they may have better fitness. They may be healthier sheep, tougher sheep, and can fight off some other things as well, but we haven't quite got that all confirmed. Wool, we have three traits. We got yearling grease fleece weight, which is abbreviated YGFW. We got yearling fleece diameter. Negative is better, and then yearling staple length. And the wool traits, because they are extremely highly heritable at 0.5, 0.6, and very repeatable, we only need one estimate on an animal in its lifetime on its wool value. So we measure the yearlings, and we are good to go. Whereas on lambs born, the more times that ewe lambs, the more accurate her record is in terms of whether she's a good one or a bad one, because they're so lowly heritable at 0.1 on lambs born.
Dr. Morrical, before you go on to your next slide, there was a question that related back to the fat again, and the question is there a limit to how much negative fat is a good thing? Can we take it to negative? I think you talked a little bit about the doability of ewes, but do you want to address that question?
Yes, we can make them too thin. All right. I don't think we're there yet in the sheep industry so far, other than maybe some extreme cases on flocks that have been on lamb plan individually for 20 or 30 years. Because in general, we haven't really pushed the fat issue. Okay. But if you are not careful on if you just use the Carcass Plus index, it's driving fat away. And you could get into some sheep that were super thin, super hard doing maybe, but they'd have a really good index because they're really negative on fat. So yes, you can push any trait too far. We could push lambs born up to 5 per ewe. Now they've only got 2 spigots. I'm pretty sure we don't want 5. But if you push that envelope, you can do it.
Okay, and another question before we move on, is 0 the mean of all the EVBs?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, and that's currently, because we haven't reset the averages, all the sheep that are born, you know, for example, I'm going to talk about, maybe it's on, like for Suffolks, the average Suffolk right now on post-weaning weight is 3.5 or something like that. Okay? I'm going the wrong way. There we go. We're getting, why am I, oh, that's why. I'm hitting the wrong button on my daughter's computer. Okay. Indexes, we've got several. 100 is average. Carcass Plus for terminal sires. We've got U.S. maternal index that the polypage use, U.S. hair index, and then U.S. range index. And we had to change the range index because it was putting so much emphasis on number born that those range ewes were starting to produce too many babies. So they had too many triplets. So they lowered how much pressure they put on lambs born. Now, I love indexes because it's really simple. But when you look at the maternal index and you need to increase milk production, it doesn't tell you whether that's why that sheep's got a really high maternal index. You got to go look at the maternal weaning weight EPD to know where you're at, okay?
Back to the question in regards to, is 0 the mean of all EVBs? 0 isn't average.
Well, the key point is 0 is the right number for all the sheep that are on NSIP, because it's every sheep that's ever been on. Okay, and as we move these flocks and breed better sheep and move them to the right on that distribution, the sheep we're breeding today in 2020 are way better than the sheep we bred in the year 2000, because we've used EBVs and pushed the envelope. Okay, so the average for the lamb crop, when we look at the percentile ranking reports, which I'll talk about in a minute, which are on the NSIP webpage, that shows you where that value on that sheep that you're looking at ranks. Is in the top 30%, top 10%, is in the bottom 40%.
Right. I think so that's a really, really useful tool.
Yeah. So if you're looking to buy sheep, you need to go to the NSIP webpage. Go at the top and go over to, what tab's it under?
Member services, you go down to reports.
Yeah. And then reports. So it's under
reports.
And there's one for each breed. So the Suffolk's got a percentile rank. Because as you look at the write-ups, people talk about the percentile rankings. That's where those come from, that page, on those reports. All right, we've already covered this. We're going on. There's a nice set of crossbred ewes. These ewes are Polypay, East Frisian, Romanov. They were some productive mamas, breeding them to hamp bucks, because that's the terminal sires Iowa State raised at the time, and that was at the research farm. Those ewes, we lambed 51 ewe lambs out of that flock the last year we had them. The ewe lambs dropped one lamb more than a 200% lamb crop. And the shepherd that was managing the farm said, if I'm going to spend all this time out here and lambing these ewes, I want more lambs born. Crossbreeding. In many cases, that's underutilized in the sheep industry. It captures hybrid vigor. The lambs have increased livability, better performance. It is the percent that crossbred lamb does than the parent average. Now, here's an important concept. If you're going to make crossbred lambs, you need to use elite parents. So you need to use a terminal sire that's 3, 4, 5 kilograms for post-weaning weight. You don't want to use one that's below average for the breed. You want to use animals that are on the right end of that distribution. Benefits of crossbreeding: we have increased livability on the lambs. We get more lambs born. So it's livability after they're born and embryo survival in the womb. We get more growth and feed efficiency, and the ewes tend to increase their reproductive rate as well. So here's an example. We can take Rambouillet ewes, made them to Polypay ram. If we assume the drop rate out of those Rambouillets is 150, and our Polypay is 200, that's 175 if they took the average. But because you get 6% increase in vigor, those crossbreds will drop 186. Now, if we select one of those Polypays in the sale, that's in the top 10% for number of lambs born, he's at least 230. So that would average those lambs up to 200% lamb crop on those crossbred ewes. That's why we need milk and management. If we're going to move our flock from a 150% drop to a 200% drop, a half a lamb more per ewe, we gotta feed them better. We better be able to raise orphans, because as my buddy Rodney Cott used to say in Montana, every set of triplets, you get 4 sets of twins. But you're going to get triplets if you've got a 200% drop rate. You got to know what you're going to do with them to make it work. We can also then take those crossbred Rambouillet Polypay ewes, made them to a terminal sire. We get a ram, the Suffolk's at 3.6 is the average right now for this year's lamb crop on post-weaning weight. We could also use Hampshires. We're going to get more rapid growth out of those lambs. They're on feed fewer days. They're more efficient. Feed efficiency and rate of gain are highly correlated. Now, we would use Suffolks and Hamps if we're going to send those lambs to market at 140 pounds. If we've got a little different system, or we're on the East Coast where they don't want market lambs that big, you probably should think about using Dorset, Shropps, Texels as your terminal sires. Or you need to way scale back the EBV on the larger frame terminal sires. Hair sheep, basically Dorper and Katahdin crosses, and go back and forth. So there's lots of resources out there. If you go to the SI's Let's Grow webinars, there are several talks on NSIP, making sheep genetically better. There's other talks on different aspects of production. The NSIP webpage, we've already talked about the percentile reports. It talks more about EBVs. There's lots more reading. I work for Premier One along with Dr. Gels from Pipestone. We also have a web page or on the web page guide to all things sheep. My two favorite web pages that I use a lot are the Consortium on Small Ruminant Parasites and the Maryland Small Ruminant page. And with that, we're going to take questions.
Okay, I am
I'm going to take a drink of water.
I'm seeing a question here. Oh, the questions are starting to jump around here. So do you use a Hampshire ram on a polypay ewe or a polypay ram on Hampshire ewes? Talk about what makes sense and what are the things to consider.
That's called breed complementarity. Okay, we got maternal sheep and then we got terminal sire sheep. Hampshire terminal sires probably going to drop 160 to 80% lamb crop out of a purebred hamp flock. Now, Todd, if I got that wrong, I'm sorry, but that's about what we're about 165 at ISU on our hamps. So we would breed a polypay ewe, a maternal machine, has lots of babies, produce milk, moderate size, so she's got a smaller feed bill. Or we could run more polypay ewes per acre than we can on pasture than we can run hamps. So we're using a small maternal factory bred to that terminal sire to get more output per ewe, and we're not feeding a bunch of great big blackface ewes. Because I'm sure, Brenda, your blackface ewes eat a lot. Okay.
Okay, here's another question. Is there a good EBV to focus on when trying to breed for low maintenance, easy keeping, mature ewes?
I would not put much emphasis on reducing fat if they've got them scanned and have a carcass EPD for fat. Obviously, if the maternal breeds may not have much ultrasound data, some do, some don't. That's kind of a fitness trait, and it's really hard to measure, to know how to build that trait. So we don't really have an EBV that fits that, okay? One of the traits we want to add in NSIP, if anybody's got Powerball winnings they want to invest in the sheep industry, we need a longevity trait, which would be similar to what this question's about, easy keeping ewes that last a long time. Now, there are easy keeping ewes that don't do anything, and there are easy keeping ewes that are really productive. You got to be careful not to have non-producing ewes. So I'd still want my maternal index to be pretty high.
Okay, we had questions earlier, and Dan referred to the percentile reports, and those are really, really useful tools. So Cody has posted that, so all of our attendees, you should be able to see the link to click on to get the reports. And that's where then if you're looking at particular sheep in the sale and you see what the EBVs are on these sheep and you're wondering, well, where does that rank? You know, chances are they're not going to be in the top across the board for everything. And so you have to decide what are the most important traits that you're looking for that are valuable to your flock, and then take a look at those EBVs and do the comparison to see, you know, if you want growth, is this ram in, let's say, the top 25% of the breed if you're looking for accelerated growth, if that's something that you're looking for. But maybe you're looking for number of lambs born, you're trying to increase that in your flock. Then again, you can look in the percentile report and select whether it's a ewe or a ram for that particular characteristic that you're trying to work on. And if you're trying to make an improvement in a particular characteristic in your flock, then the higher the ranking they are in the percentile, we would assume that greater improvement would be made.
And you're probably going to pay more money. And the real extreme sheep are the sheep that bring money, because in most cases, they are going into another breeder's flock as a stud ram rather than just as a commercial ram. How extreme that piece is and how the rest of them match up. But you got to do, part of it is you got to do your homework looking at your flock. What do I need to do? What do my sheep need to do better? Do they need to have more lambs born, more lambs weaned? Do they need to milk faster? Do they need to grow faster? Do they need more muscle? Do they need to reduce their parasite load? I'm deworming sheep too often, so I need to maybe breed it more parasite resistance. You may need to do a better job pasture management, because genetics alone is not going to fix every problem we have in the sheep industry. You know, we're not going to, we can't breed them to where the coyotes don't like them, because then the humans may not like them either, and then we don't have any market.
I think all of our participants can see a comment that Cody Heimke, one of our shop breeders, has posted in regards to easy keeping. He's observed that some of the harder keeping ewes in his flock have EBVs that are within the latest 10% of his breed. So, you know, that's something
The
maybe.
top 10%? Yeah, I think we haven't been at it very long in the sheep business. The other industry, swine, beef cattle, we've pushed some traits too far. We pushed yearling weight too far in the beef cattle business. We made cattle too big, and they wouldn't hardly fit on the chain going through the packing plant. They also had humongous birth weights to go with those big yearling weights, and then we had dystocia. I think we're about to that point where we're not just chasing yearling or post-weaning weight anymore. We've got them growing fast enough. Now we're making more muscle, making them better structured, making them more complete sheep.
Okay, another one of our NSIP breeders has suggested the search engine. I know, Dan, you have computer trouble, so maybe we can't go to that. But there, if you go to the nsip.org website, you go across the toolbar on the top over to the very far right-hand side. Under resources, you will see a term called searchable database. You click on that searchable database and there's a wealth of information there. You can put in particular EBVs that you want to search to see what sheep are out there, whether you're looking maybe for high muscle or you're looking for number of lambs born or number of lambs weaned, whatever the particular trait that you are interested in. It allows you to make those selections and to search and actually to find sheep and find breeders that have the kinds of sheep with the particular characteristics that you are looking for. And so that is a very good tool. And if you go to, again, the resources section on the nsip.org page, I believe there is a webinar that you can click on that will teach you how to use the searchable database. Looks like Dr. Morrical's trying to bring that up on
I'm trying to get NSIP up. There we go. My daughter's keyboard is nothing like mine.
So you need to minimize your PowerPoint then so we can see your screen of your internet browser.
Does that help you? Oh.
No, you want to share you want to still want to be sharing your screen, but you should be able to have your.
How's
okay.
that?
There you go. You got it.
Okay,
Perfect.
so under member services, the report section is down here. And then we can look at, we got hair sheep, maternal wool, range reports, terminal sires. We're going to pull up the hair sheep. Haven't talked much about hair sheep, so we'll give them a little extra screen time here. And there's the percentile report. So the best Katahdin on predicted eye muscle depth is 2.3. The best weaning fecal egg count is minus 100. So the top is the elite ones. Down here at the bottom, the zeros are the duds. We got one at 607 on weaning fecal egg count. And then our indexes are, the index is clear over here on the right. Okay, let's go back and see if I can get the search engine one up.
While you're doing that, here's another question from an attendee. If they need to improve in multiple areas, is it better to focus on one particular trait, one number at a time, or can you improve all numbers across the board at once?
Okay. That's a really good question, and I didn't explain that very well when I talked about remember the three factors that affect genetic improvement. One is selection differential. If we only select for one trait, we can really push that selection differential. But we really need to try to keep other things relatively status quo, so we can make sure that they're at least positive for that trait and then find them traits that are the most extreme. So for example, we can go into this searchable database. Maybe. Come on, baby. So there's an online searchable database. If you know, like for example, in the catalog listing, it's got, in many cases, it's got the 16-digit number for the sheep that's in the sale. So we plug that number in. It'll bring up that sheep. And that's where you, up here at the top left is where we would put in the animal's ID, and it would bring up that one's information. So if we want to do a search, we're going to do a search on terminals. We're going to talk about HAMPs. And we want them born in after December of 2019, so it's just going to be this year's lamb crop. And we want to find just males. When it says only proven animals, that would be animals that have offspring. Status, died, current. We want them current, which they should be if they're born this year. And let's say for birth weight, so we've got the ranges on what they are. I'm going to put a birth weight max in of 0.5. I'm going to put a maximum or a minimum weaning weight of 3. Whoops. I'm going to try to put in a minimum weight of 3. Maternal weaning weight on my hamps, I don't care if they milk or not. Not that important. I want them to be 5 on post weaning weight. Let's see, what should we put in on fat? Let's say minimum fat. 5 is the extreme. Let's go -2. So I want a little bark on them. And let's see what we find. So then we go down here and we go view results. So it found 6 rams that met that criteria. And if you go over here on the right, it shows you the details about that sheep. That happens to be University of Wisconsin. That's a poor choice. No, it's okay. They've got good hamps too. Okay, other questions about the sort engine? Again, it's on the NSIP webpage. It is under Find Breeding Stock.
And it's generally updated once a month because those of us who are producers are sending in data all the time. There are 2 data runs every month in NSIP. And Rusty Bridgette, our director of NSIP, updates the search engine. He takes all of the new data and dumps that into the search engine once a month.
Any other questions, Brenda?
I see another one. Question is, will other breeds be added to the existing breeds that we currently have in NSIP? Are there any other breeds that will be added?
This is a completely voluntary practice. We've got to have people, breeders themselves, agree to get on NSIP and participate. Some breeds have been very positive, proactive in doing that. Other breeds have been less active. That was pretty politically good way to say that. So if a breed that you're interested in, want to raise, doesn't have EPDs, they're not participating, you need to encourage those breeders you've been buying from to get on NSIP or change breeds. Because I see an EBV is kind of like a guarantee. It tells you what that sheep's going to do in your flock. You can go to the sale barn. You can go to the state fair. You can buy all kinds of ewe settlers, maybe. But you have no idea of how that genetics is going to perform. Whereas when you have an EBV, we know. A little preachy there, but that's okay.
Well, that's what we're about. Here is another question. Is there an accuracy percentage for the individual EBVs?
Yes. Do I ever worry about accuracy? No. And I've said this since the day we started NSIP, because people said, well, the accuracies are too low. Well, what is the accuracy of buying one at the state fair? What's the accuracy of buying one at the sale barn? Zero. The sheep industry is so far behind the other red meat industries, we got to not worry about accuracy and just push. Now, if I've got two rams with equal genetic value, I obviously want to use the more accurate ram. But accuracy to me is not very important. Sorry.
I don't see any other questions coming in. I think there were a couple that Rusty had answered privately. There was one that was a pretty detailed question that's probably beyond the scope of this webinar, because the goal of this was to be really a cursory look at NSIP and utilizing EBVs. Once you get into the program, there are a lot of other training opportunities to help you through the process. But you know, it's not difficult at all. And understanding EBVs, you know, I have never been a person who is wonderful with mathematical equations at all. And sometimes folks are intimidated by numbers, but you can very easily learn how to use the numbers. You don't need to understand how all of these numbers are calculated, and you just need to understand what is the range. You can use the percentile report and select the particular EBVs that you are interested in making improvements in. And it's very easy to make comparisons as to where those EBVs fall and what would be useful to you in your flock.
Brenda, there are a few more. I just noticed a bunch of questions popped up in question and answer, and I may not get to them right away, so maybe you can read some of them off.
Oh, okay. I see we have some people that have put in the questions in question and answer as opposed to chat, and I have had the chat box open. Okay, how many years does it take for individual flock data to be sufficient enough to make sound management decisions? Who would like to answer that?
Cody, you gonna answer that one, or you want me to?
You're the expert on here. I'm just trying to host this a little bit.
Yeah. Well,
I'll give it a shot, but I'll let.
As we think about how long the flock's been on, obviously the challenge is when you throw the 3, 4, and 5-year-old ewes in that have 1 year of data, okay? I would not do a lot of extreme calling, selection, pressure on that group of ewes. Now, the ewe lambs that lamb, and that's their first production record, if you've got a couple of ewe lambs that excel on growth or lambs born or maternal weaning weight, because they've only got 1 record. So probably 2 to 3 years before I get crazy about, well, I'm going to get rid of all these ewes that have low post-weaning weights. So go ahead, Cody.
Yeah, and I'll add a lot of that will just, depend on the heritability of those traits too, and the numbers that you have going in.
Okay, we have a few more questions here. Coarse wool doesn't pay the shearing bill. what cross can a commercial Midwest grower that has been using polypay rams use now, because there's no wool data on polypay sheep, to improve the wool check and not sacrifice size and number of lambs born?
Oh, this.
That's a pretty tall order.
I think that is to me, that is the problem. And what do I breed my polypay ewes to get crossbred commercial ewes? Now, I don't think we're ever going to get wool value out of the Midwest sheep up to where it will pay the shearing bill. Because I think we're paying $6 or $7 a head, at least at my son's place. And I know those blackface ewes are never going to produce enough wool, no matter what we bred them to cover the shearing bill. So shearing's just going to be a loss for us in the Midwest. Maybe Sam's, South African meat merinos, might be a cross to put on polypay ewes. That would definitely improve your wool. Probably not going to lose too much in terms of lambs born. There's not a lot of Sam's breeders in the United States, but that's kind of a dual purpose wool sheep.
Okay, we have another question. Is there a way to check inbreeding percentage on the NSIP database? It shows up on the percentile report, but they wondered if it is something that they can check on rams for the sales. I don't believe the inbreeding coefficient is in the searchable database.
Yes, it is.
Is it?
I think so. At least it's on the individual genetic listing that we get back.
Yeah, you could easily ask the breeder.
Now, but do we care about inbreeding? Theoretically, yes, we do. We don't like inbreeding. We're scared to death. However, if you buy a ram that's not related to your flock in any way, as soon as you breed into your ewes, the offspring have no inbreeding. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, other than if he's extremely highly inbred, he may not live as long. He may not be as tough. Cody's giving me a wry smile. It's okay. So I say things once in a while that aren't right. Cody, you've got lots of inbreeding because there's not much places to go.
Right.
And you're not seeing it.
No, you're right. That's why I gave you the wry smile. I mean, there's certainly genetic populations out there, you know, within pure breeding groups that have a pretty high inbreeding coefficient. And, you know, the inbreeding depression discussion that I think those of us that have gone through most classes are taught about, we rarely see sheep that, you know, have a 25% inbreeding coefficient. I don't see, you know, in my EBVs, I don't see a difference in those sheep. I did look on the searchable data. I don't see it up there. The key is you're buying a terminal animal. The only time you maybe need to be concerned about that is if you're buying a purebred animal to put into your own flock. But at that point, you probably already know what the pedigree is on those sheep. You can figure some of that out yourself pretty easily.
Okay, we have another question. How do we join, and can small farms join, or is it only for large farmers? It certainly is not for large farmers. We have been enrolled for 20 years and carry a population of about 30 ewes.
So anybody can sign up on NSIP, go to the web page. It tells you how to become a member, and you just participate.
We have another question: is how does NSIP know if you are feed or graze? I think if you're feeding grain or you're grazing is the question.
Okay. Let's go back to NSIP doesn't care. And you go, well, obviously sheep on grain grow faster, but we still make the calculations within the contemporary group. So how animals that are all handled the same, raised the same, fed the same, born in the same season, those get compared in the contemporary group average. So we would not compare a grass-raised lamb versus a corn-fed lamb. And it's how well an animal does compared to the contemporary group average.
Okay, we had another question on the other index, the SRC $ index.
Is that self-reproducing something $?
Yes.
Okay. You can tell how much I use that index, which is 0. That's an Australian index that I don't think anybody in the United States pays much.
I have the information behind it, but I need to find it on my computer here. I know a Dorper breeder in Oregon uses that quite a bit. That's tied to lamb plan and not NSIP. But I'll see if I can find it. If there's another question, you can move on and I'll jump back in.
Yeah, but he's been raising sheep for a long time, and he is tied so heavily with Australia. That's why he uses that one.
Yeah, effectively what that index is it's similar to a Carcass Plus, but it takes into account some maternal traits. And that's where I was trying to find the actual specifics behind it on this other computer.
Self-replacing, Jerry Sorensen is saying self-replacing carcass index.
So it takes into account some maternal traits, so you get enough ewe lambs born to keep your flock going.
Okay. Another question is, and this will vary, but what is the average annual cost per head to maintain the NSIP data, dues, ultrasound, fecal egg count test? You know, there's an enrollment fee, and then there are data fees that are involved. Those are really pretty nominal. I can't remember those now just off the top of my head, but it's based on the number of sheep that you have enrolled in the program. But then, you know, it gets up to a certain point when you get really large, then, you know, that cost drops off. Then there certainly are costs to some of the other things. If you're doing a fecal egg count, there are a variety of ways to get that done. Some are more cost effective than others, and just the same way with ultrasound. In my flock, we do ultrasound. Ultrasound is not required. Basically, the weights are what is required, but there are some of these other kinds of things, like if you want to ultrasound, certainly that does give you another piece of information that will make the numbers more valuable. The fecal egg count test is used in a very, very small percentage of people within NSIP. However, there is significantly increasing interest in it because in so many parts of the country, parasites have become a real issue, and there is the resistance to the wormers. I think the cost is outlined on the website.
Yeah, and I actually, Brenda, while I was looking for SRC, I do have a document here that we used to share in the past. But you know, it's different for different flock sizes, and of course, since there's a per lamb rate, it depends on what your lambing rate is. But you know, really quickly here, if you've got, I'm going to start on the big end. If you've got a 600 ewe flock with 140% drop, your cost is $4.10 a lamb. You got 180% drop, you're looking at $3.96 a lamb. On the other far extreme, if you've got a 20 ewe flock with 140% drop, your cost is going to be about $8.86 a lamb. at 180% drop, you're at about 767 per lamb. So you're basically looking between $4 and just shy of $9 per lamb. Now that's just the fees to NSIP. Like Brenda said, the ultrasound is optional. A lot of that stuff is optional, and those will have additional fees that are separate to those service providers. And I haven't found SRC yet.
And so it is an investment. I guess that's the way I look at it. You know, it certainly is a cost, but we have found that it's been a good investment, that the data that we receive from the program allows us to make decisions to be more profitable. It also adds value to our sheep. If I was selling Suffolk sheep without numbers, I probably would not be selling my sheep for the price tag that I am today with the numbers, because buyers see value in those numbers, and that increases the price that I can charge for my sheep. So in our case, we have found that it's a good investment for improving our breeding program, as well as it's increased our profitability because it has added value. It's added value to our sheep that people want to purchase them.
Can I add on to that? Because you just gave me the purpose of the spreadsheet that I developed was how many sheep do you need to sell to cover the cost of lamb plan? And that was the purpose of what I put together here. So, you know, if you're looking at a $225 cull value for a ram, but if he's got good numbers and he's got good phenotype, and the numbers allow you to sell that ram at, say, $700, you gain that extra $470. What does that mean? In a 20 head ewe flock with 140% drop, you only have to sell a half a ram, 0.52 rams, in order to cover your costs. On a 60 head ewe flock, by selling one ram, based on its numbers, you've now covered your costs of NSIP. So that's that added value that Brenda talked about. And aside from that, you're also making an improvement in your own flock, and there's inherent value there too.
Okay, a question is, what would cause a ram's index to drop over 30% after one lambing season?
I saw that question and I was hoping you were going to pass on that one because I don't know the answer. In those cases where something really odd happens, I think we need to talk to Dr. Ron, our expert technology person, and check the data to make sure everything was entered correctly. So I talked to Rusty about that directly, and then talked to, what's Ron's last name?
Dr. Ron Lewis from Nebraska.
Dr. Lewis, thank you. I had a brain lapse there. And the only thing I didn't know about this computer, it makes my bald head look really bald.
You know, there can be a variety of things that come into play there that you can see a swing in an index. You know, maybe the initial index was based on a very small number of sheep, a small contemporary group. Then they come in and now it's maybe a much larger group. It also could be that that ram really didn't have appropriate competition to be compared to. So maybe that ram is now in comparison to an NSIP, another ram, and so maybe their numbers were not that is accurate in the beginning, but now that there's another ram that has sired offspring in that particular flock, that the ram that's dropped has been compared to, that could be a reason that that particular ram may have dropped, is because he's been compared to somebody else and he maybe hasn't performed. But there are a lot of things. But you know, if you ever have something like that you're kind of scratching your head and you're wondering, well, what really happened here? That is something that Rusty can talk through with you to see, you know, is it a data input issue? Was there some kind of an error made? Or what are all of those factors in the bigger picture that perhaps could have caused that kind of a result? Here's another question. Do you have to have EBVs for your flock to join, or do you just build off of your first lamb crop?
That's easy. You build off your first lamb crop.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions.
All right, well, good luck to everybody. Thanks for your interest tonight. Sorry, my computer blew up and we got through this, okay. Thanks, Becky.
We made it through. Thank you to all of our presenters. I'd also like to thank Cody. Ended up coming in, doing a little presenting. Cody Heimke is a Schrapp breeder. Been involved in NSIP for a number of years. I don't know how many years, Cody, but you're a lot younger than I am, so probably not not as long as I have. But Cody also serves on the NSIP board of directors, and Cody has been running the technology tonight for the webinar, trying to keep us up and running and all of the behind the scenes. So I wanted to, as we close, I wanted to thank Corey for Cody, excuse me, for his service this evening in keeping us afloat with the technology. So thanks to Cody, thanks to Dr. Morrical, thanks to Becky, and also thanks to Premier for being our sponsor this evening. So we are delighted that you were able to join us this evening. This webinar will be posted. We were recording it. It will be posted by sometime tomorrow on the NSIP website. Under resources, there's a whole list of webinars that you can click on and watch at any time. And so if there's something that you want to review that maybe you need a little bit more understanding of, you can go back and watch this webinar. The link will be posted sometime later tomorrow.
Brenda, and if they need to get a hold of me, they can go through Premier, the Ask an Expert, if they didn't get my phone number written down, and I'll be glad to discuss things with them tomorrow, the next day, whatever.
Yep, I think Becky has offered if people have questions as well, and you know, and if you're new, talking to existing NSIP breeders, we're tend to be a friendly group and are very interested in helping people to understand the program. I believe firmly in it, and I am more than happy to help people understand the different traits, the different EBVs that affect Suffolk's, the breed that I raise. If you ask me about maternal indexes and some of those other kinds of things, I wouldn't be a good resource person. But if you're interested in a particular breed, if you talk to an NSIP breeder of that breed, I think they can be a very good resource for you. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Good luck.
All right. Now, how do I make sure I keep this recorded? Stop recording.